Welcome to Planetary Gig Talk, Tales of Music and Magic. I'm your host, Jefferson Classy, Chief Spiritual Dude of the Planetary Gig Society, whose mission is creating unity through music, or as I like to say, making connections through music with the intention of bringing peace. And today I am in Studio One at the worldwide headquarters of the Planetary Gig Society, and our guest is around the DC area, not too far, but we're talking via Zoom, and I'm very pleased to be able to finally get the opportunity to talk with somebody who I don't know, but I know his wife, and talk to his wife, and she's great. So, Richard Lewellen, thanks very much for taking the time.
Well, that's great. I'm glad to do it, and that's a fantastic way for people to know me, is that they know my wife. I'm very happy for that to be the introduction.
Oh yeah, well she is great. I met her through Harmony Inc., and we did a little legal consultation helping them out, but we become friends and interviewed her because she also is a Barbershop Harmony singer with Harmony Inc. I know they won a international championship with their group Epic, and I just think she's great, and I'm so enamored with this barbershop singing. I don't know that much about it, but I know that you're not only a lawyer and not only a musician, but also a music therapist and also a barbershop harmony person and judge and et cetera. And so there's all kinds of good stuff to talk about.
There is. You know, I can't claim to be a lawyer. I went to law school, and it kind of didn't take. And I ended up never practicing law, and it took me until I had much later in life married Christina, and we'd started our family. And our firstborn was on the autism spectrum, and she ended up receiving, among other things, music therapy. Connected with her school, and that's when I found my career. I kept thinking, boy, I could have done well to have heard about this 20 years earlier, but we all have our own paths to walk. I've been doing the Barbershop Harmony stuff since high school, and that ended up being how I eventually met Christina, and we have this family together now.
Wow, that's so great, and I think that making the choice of not pursuing a career in law versus music is a really good one that I wish I had understood was something that I could have done a long time ago, but music didn't tap me on the shoulder too hard until much later on in my life. But that leads to, the first thing I'd like to ask is, so when do you remember music coming into your life initially? Was there music in your household? Did your parents sing or play instruments? Were you doing barbershop harmony stuff back then, or were you young? How did you get into how did music come into your life?
Well, I know that my dad wasn't a musician, but he was just a mega fan of jazz music. And so he was listening to that a bunch. And my mom was a classically trained pianist. I think she may have had a minor in music performance in her when she got her bachelor's degree, but she was on the medical side of things for her career. But even though that's the case, that there was that music in the house, my earliest memories of music are about a couple of specific moments. One was there was a childhood LP that was the story of Aladdin. And the music background to this story was Scheherazade. And I didn't know that it was Scheherazade. I thought of it as being Aladdin and so on. But that music, even now, is profoundly moving to me, that particular piece. So I remember falling in love with music when I was a toddler. With a specific story and that particular piece of music. And then a little bit later on, saw Fantasia. And so some of the pieces from Disney's Fantasia really stuck with me. And you can imagine, if you're familiar with that movie at all. There's so many wonderful pieces in there, and so I was captured by, again, this is now classical music stuff. And then a little bit later on, I'm still a child. The Jungle Book came out, the Disney movie, and I was so taken with those vultures, even before I ever heard about Barbershop. And frankly, before I heard about the Beatles, which is those vultures were a little bit modeled on the Beatles. They did their harmony on their song, That's What Friends Are For, or something like that. We're Your Friends was the opening line of that song. And so I was captivated by that harmony. I guess the next step in the musical journey, I would have been in middle school. This would have been in the middle 70s. And I started learning guitar, just the very basics, because I wanted to play the Beatles songs. I was a huge Beatles fan. And just a couple of years later, when I was a freshman in high school, I met my best friend, and he had been barbershop singing for 1 month, and his dad had been doing it for 3 months. And they introduced me to barbershop when I was Barbershop Harmony when I was 14, and I've been doing it ever since. Over 40 years now. I've been a chorus director most of that time, and in the last 10 years, I've become a singing judge, one of the 3 panelists that would judge any Barbershop Harmony competition. We have singing, performance, and music. So I focus more on the voice side of the equation with that work. But Barbershop Harmony has been it's been kind of the center of my life since high school, and I owe a lot to it.
Wow, that's amazing. And you know, I was thinking, well, gosh, I loved Sound of Music. Just, you know, of course, in those days, you couldn't just see it over and over again. You had, you know, the theater. You'd have to go to the theater, and then it would come on once a year on TV. But it didn't necessarily feel accessible to me. It was kind of like out there, even though I knew that we could sing Happy Birthday and that sort of thing. But you had, for some reason, you picked up a guitar because you wanted to play. Maybe it was that your mom was, you know, a player, a musician. You really could, and then when you got sort of enthralled by the Beatles, you wanted to do that.
I wanted to do it bad. I mean, it was a yearning, and so I've joked about this. But you know, when I got into Barbershop Harmony, there's 4 of us standing there making sounds together. It was my way to be a Beatle, you know, and it really felt like that. It felt amazing to be one of 4 singers making music. And I've always enjoyed the work in barbershop choruses because it's more accessible. More people can participate. Not everyone, you know, feels that desire to be the one voice singing their line. Sometimes they want to be in the community of voices. And so there's different ways to do it. But that initial thrill, that first time I sang with 3 other people, I was hooked. And I can still feel the chills that I was feeling then.
Wow. You know, and I think we have a number of things to talk about, but I wanted to ask, so why is it, maybe you have some thoughts from your music therapy perspective, and we can, again, talk about that, but why do you think people do feel like I did, in a sense, that you can't really participate, or if you know, there a lot of people just don't pick it up. I mean, we were all very musical. Everybody loves music. I've said I could probably interview everybody on the planet about the role of music in their lives or the power of music, and they would have something to say. But some people pick it up and other people don't pick it up. Any sort of thoughts on that?
Sure. What comes to mind immediately is, in some ways, the perfection of it, or the context that we interact with it. You know, with, like, if I'm thinking of Scheherazade or any of that music from Fantasia, you have the finest orchestras in the world playing that music, and that seems very removed from, you know, little old me. But by the time, you know, I'm a little older, just a little bit older, and I'm watching that Jungle Book movie, and I'm seeing those vultures kind of just messing around, and the fact that they were playing with each other, that they were joking, they were messing around and singing, it seemed like it was kind of like a club, like they were a team, they were friends, and that quality is a big part of where Barbershop Harmony came from. Barbershop Harmony started about around the same time that jazz started, with some of the same people. Louis Armstrong and Sidney Bechet and some of those early jazz musicians were those young men on the street corner singing Barbershop Harmony. Barbershop Harmony was considered lowbrow. It was stuff where it was improvisational. They're changing the melody. They're finding different chords and different ways to harmonize things. And so it was something being Barbershop Harmony. I have little air quotes there. Was not a compliment back in the 19-teens, let's say. And it wasn't until until a Caucasian quartet, the American quartet, recorded some of those old songs in that same style that it became more mainstream. But the point of this, though, is this combination of having interesting rhythms, and which came from the African traditions, and this improvisational search for the harmonies made it very creative. There was also, as you'll know, in jazz music, you'll hear musicians have a solo, and then another solo will happen. And if you went to a jazz club and you saw them just kind of working together, when they're performing a solo, it's like they're performing really not even so much for the audience, but they're performing for their other bandmates, kind of like inspire them and say, well, what do you think of this? And wasn't that great? And now good luck following that. So there's a lot of love, but there's a certain challenge to what they would do. Tap dancers have that kind of thing too, where they'll challenge each other. And so that's what was going on with early barbershop. Was somebody would, if they got to the note first, then the other guy had to go find a note that would work, and they would do stuff to kind of amaze each other. And so the fact that barbershop in how it was commonly practiced was had this improvisational, accessible piece to it. I think is part of it. But for it to be done well, for any of the music to be done well, there's a certain precision too. So that the perfection of it has its appeal, because when you get some of it, it's very thrilling. When you achieve some of it yourself, it's very thrilling. So it's got that combination of you can kind of make it up as you go, maybe, and at the same time you'll know when it's working. You'll know when you're landing it.
So it really is a fascinating thing. I didn't realize that Barbershop Harmony was really more of an African American originated style. Because I remember talking to somebody not too long ago, and talking about the podcast, and I interviewed about Barbershop Harmony, and they said that's such white music, and I thought, well, wait, I'm not sure that's right. It's kind of amazing the way that things do, transform, and we picked up a lot of that from a lot of different folks. Could you also talk a little bit about, just so we can have all our, general thoughts on the table, music therapy and what that is, because I know that it's not just playing your guitar for your mom if she has a cold. It's very scientific. You have to be taught music therapy, how to do it. It's a professional endeavor, and I'm not sure everybody understands that. And maybe if you could sort of just define that a little bit, or explain it from your perspective, what that is and what you do, that would be great.
Sure, absolutely. Music therapists are board certified, and they have to complete a training program, which is tantamount to a bachelor's degree in the subject matter. So you're studying music theory, music history, You have to have a certain level of performance expertise on a number of instruments, but you're also studying a number of psychology courses, as well as courses about special needs and trauma. And so the populations that are served by music therapists, it's really literally cradle to grave. So you'll have music therapists in a neonatal unit helping to soothe these newborns because they're having these pinprick, blood drawn happening, sometimes multiple times a day. And so that's kind of traumatizing. So there's the music therapist there. There's also work with children in schools with autism and developmental disabilities. We have music therapists who are working with at-risk teenagers to deal with emotional challenges and addiction. Similarly, working with veterans who may be dealing with addiction because they have pain that they're dealing with, either physical pain from their service or PTSD and needing to process things. So we're there with them. There's, as a matter of fact, that as the profession was becoming established, it was work with veterans returning from World War II, where the profession started to really get its footing. But we also do work in rehabilitation. You may have folks who are recovering from a stroke and need to work on getting their balance and their gait together. You've heard stories about music being used for people to recover speech. So Congresswoman Gabby Giffords had a head wound from a gunshot,
right,
and she lost her ability to speak. And it was a music therapist and working with speech therapists to do something called melodic intonation training. I believe it's what it was called. But they used the melody to allow her to use a different part of her brain to access speech. So she could sing rather than speak. And then after a little while, she was able to just kind of, perhaps in her mind, she was still thinking about a tune while she would form her words. And so that was one approach to rehabilitation. I've done some research with pain management. People can only get their shots for their back pain with a certain frequency, and then in between times, good luck. And we found that music therapy can help with that. My initial training was in working with folks with dementia and Alzheimer's. And so there's a time of the day. Everyone who has family members with Alzheimer's always knows about what's going to happen in the afternoon. There's the term called sundowning, when a number of folks, a lot of the folks with Alzheimer's will become more agitated. They may be more confused, wander. And so so what is it? What is it? When we're working with older adults, we are particularly tapping into the music of their young adulthood or their youth. That music, for some reason, is the stuff that when we heard it, it gets recorded in multiple ways inside of us. It's not just a memory of a song. It's how we felt at the time and how we experienced the song. And so that our memories are very close to the limbic system and our emotions and our physiological responses. And so using that music, that we'll call the preferred music of our clients, that just seems to have a certain additional power to really, in some cases, the person with dementia might find themselves more present for a while or able to function at a little bit higher level. The person who's struggling with gait, it's the rhythm of the music that allows them to organize their motor responses. For the child with autism, it's that a good balance of the sensory input that they're experiencing. Some children are sensory defensive, some aren't getting enough sensory input, and that music helps to balance that out and hold them in a space, hold attention, and some work can be done. And so in a lot of cases, the music is a modality to do other work. And then in other cases, the music is the thing. The experience of the music itself and of music making and sharing that is the whole point of the work.
Wow. So that is just amazing to me. And it makes so much sense. It's sort of curative in a lot of ways. You also hear about, people in hospice, the threshold singers as sort of soothing. I mean, it sounds like it's sort of healing and it's repairing. There's so many what is it that music is really doing? I mean, how's this happening? I mean, I understand an old person, when I hear the songs from my teens, it takes me back to some of those thoughts, but how is it, really, what is that power of music that's really, what are we looking at? What are we hearing with music? What's really underneath of some of these things?
Well, it's interesting. The more we learn about it, the more we realize we don't know. But with the ability to do brain scans while people are hearing music or playing music, we're able to see that the brain's response to music is widely distributed across both hemispheres. There's lots of kind of cross wiring, lots of connections tied to all kinds of memories and experiences and motor responses. And so we will have a physiological reaction to the music when the music is dramatic or has a certain kind of rhythm or tempo to it. If the harmonies are changing at a certain pace, all that stuff can be, you might consider it stimulative, and you'll literally see the person's respiration and heartbeat and other things rise. And then there are other kinds of music where there's much less frequency to the change of the harmony, or the melody is more sedate. We find that might be more calming. And so just the ability to have music, preferred or not, preferred is better, but music kind of match the mood, match the state, match, even if it's somebody who's in pain, bring that intensity with the music, match it. And once it's matched, then you can adjust that music. You can put on the next piece of music and the next piece and kind of move in the direction that you're hoping to go, either to stimulate somebody to become more focused or to help them become more calm and relaxed and perhaps feel less pain.
Have you, I'm sure that you've sort of seen or experienced some pretty profound things, or kind of amazing things, or just wild, or I don't know what, but any thoughts of experiences that you've had? And there can be the experiences of seeing demonstrable things happen in music therapy, but boy, you hear some Barbershop Harmony singers knock it out of the park, and you probably get the same sort of reaction. But just things that might jump to the top of your noggin there on power of music, things that you may have seen with people, patients, or just people you played with, or anything. It all kind of ties together, it seems like.
It does. It really does. That thing we were just talking about, stimulative versus sedative. When I was an intern in my music therapy training, one of the things that I was told was almost like a caution that when a person with dementia is really overwrought, they're very confused, they might actually be in physical pain. You don't come at them with the, oh, they're there, soothing kind of response, because that actually feels like fingernails on a chalkboard, we're told. You have to kind of meet them where they are. There's this thing called the ISO principle. It's how we tend to mirror our environment. And if somebody's nodding their head as you are right now, I find that I'm nodding my head. Mm-hmm. Somebody's tapping their toe.
Entrainment.
Yeah, entrainment, exactly. Somebody's kind of leaning into a conversation. The other person might find that they're leaning in too. Somebody speaking with a Southern accent, you might find that you have one too now. that kind of thing, that entrainment is really powerful. It's a superpower. It's how the baby through mimicry learns so much in the first moments of life. So it's a human superpower that we don't tap into enough. And so that coming and matching somebody where they are, if they have no speech, if they have advanced dementia, they can feel that connection with someone because you're matching where they are. So a couple of moments come to mind. I remember, again, this is early in my training, and so this is part of why it's so vivid to me, because I hadn't experienced it in this setting before. We're doing some drumming in a group with folks with dementia, and we've got Glenn Miller on in the background, and so there's great big band swing music happening, and we're drumming along. And then there's this one fella kind of across the way. He's looking at me, and I'm looking at him. And then he's doing some stuff on his drums, and I'm copying him. And he notices me copying him. And so then he starts doing some stuff, and I do it. And I just, we go back and forth with this. And then pretty soon, I'm just doing exactly what he's doing. I'm not doing a call and response. I'm actually on his surfboard,
Wow.
right with him. And he is darn near nonverbal, so he's not able to have a conversation with somebody. But because we had this connection with the eyes and with the drums, we were in sync. We were carrying on a conversation and having an experience together, and it just absolutely blew me away that kind of thing was possible. Another person, after I was there a few more months, a gentleman that tended to have just very, very repetitive speech. He would rattle off the same couple of phrases over and over and over again. And it turns out he was rattling off all of these battles that he was in as a Marine in World War II, these sea battles in the Pacific. And we ended up doing some individual music therapy, and I would put on the music that he was listening to as a 19-year-old. And I ended up finding a photograph of the actual destroyer that he served on, and pull it up on the computer, and we started talking about it with that music in the background. And then instead of this repetitive language, we got these long stories about now here. I don't even know if it's true or not, but I wanted to live in this world with him, because apparently he became MacArthur's aide, and he and MacArthur had this thing going on, these jokes that they would say to each other, like MacArthur would tell him to teach these sailors how to shoot, and things like that. They couldn't apparently get any of their shells into Corregidor, and they needed him to tell the gunners how to do it, and so on. But even if that wasn't true, it was true to him in that moment. He was very, very alive, captivated, and the stories were phenomenal. And so this was a guy that all that part of his life was all shut off. And he was one of those ones that would have that sundowning thing. He had to go and sit in the front of the care center where they were, at the window near the front door, every afternoon, because that was his post. He had to be on guard duty. And so he was very agitated if he wasn't able to go there and do that particular role. So that was a really inspiring and moving experience. But then when my mother was passing, she passed several years back, a very, very quick, aggressive pancreatic cancer. And she was in hospice, and she was in a lot of pain. They couldn't keep up with it. They were always chasing the pain, and they would do a little bit more and a little bit more, and they were always kind of behind. And so, when the body is actively dying, that's very, very painful. Yeah. And because of that early warning in music therapy, this was not the time for lots of soothing stuff. It was time for just really intense sounds, and when she would wail, I would wail with her. Just be in that space with her, and it was very profound. because I think I normally would have felt a lot of anxiety, some fear about not being able to give her what she needed
Right.
or anything like that, and instead I was really quite at peace, just um, because of being around people who were in pain and were struggling, and knowing that that's part of life, is the most natural thing in the world to be in pain and to struggle. It's the most natural thing in the world to die, and so. Since these are normal, natural things, there was really nothing to fear. We just had to, go through this together, and it was an experience I'll always carry with me. And I think I wouldn't have been able to be that present. I think I would have been pretty worried about all kinds of things, and probably yelling at a doctor or a nurse to help her with her pain or something like that, instead of just kind of being present with her.
Yeah, wow. That is profound. Um, what are your, since you're sort of a professional at the effects of music on people and the in some ways the healing aspects, what about just us every day? People, I had this problem with my knee. I fell and I had knee surgery, and I've been using tuning forks and trying to listen to, Tibetan healing bowls and things like that, and learning to play guitar. It seems like it's soothing. It seems like it helps. It seems like it is good for me. Any perspective on sort of general population? I know that people love to jump in their car if they're upset and crank up the tunes and that sort of thing. But do you have perspectives on just everyday people going through their lives and ways to tap into music or think about in that regard?
Yes, absolutely. I think one of the things you mentioned probably before you started recording, you talked about intention. I think that lots of people use music as a resource, as an emotional resource, in all kinds of different ways, and may not even be aware that they're doing that. But they might find that when they're agitated or concerned, they kind of reach for something. Often that's something involving music. Talking about what you were doing with your knee, there is something about those sound vibrations kind of getting into your body. So there's this thing called the gate theory of pain, which is that when it has to do with when certain nerves when the gate is open, the pain is perceived, and when the gate's closed, it's not perceived, even though it's still firing. It's still being sent, but it's not being perceived. And so one of the things that people can do this at home. They can do it they can do it in their car. But something called a somatron chair was built. It's like a long. It almost looks like a little bit like a dentist chair, and it's loaded with speakers in different places throughout.
Wow.
And when you turn the music on, different types of music hit it in different ways. Classical piano or new age or rock and roll. It's going to hit it in different ways, and people will find that certain types of music feel real good when they're in that chair. But part of what's happening is it's kind of normalizing the signals in those areas that were firing a lot of pain, and so it just kind of gets it out of that habit, I guess, right, of sending pain. And so we were trying to help folks create playlists and find a peaceful place in their home to be able to kind of do some of this work themselves. Spend a little bit of time. If they, for instance, if they knew that their pain was acute, but it was also chronic, it tended to happen. They could almost anticipate what types of things were going to fire up their pain. That they could do some stuff ahead of that to try to
not reactive to sort of proactively
not fire it, or that they knew that when they got back from whatever they were doing and were back home, They knew how they needed to do this, maybe so they could get a good night's sleep. They would do their little regimen. You know? So and some people, when they're just feeling blue, they wanted to hear some songs that are really, really, really blue, and or other times they're feeling down and they want to hear happy songs. So it's different for different folks, and people tend to know what works for them. But the idea about intention is we often don't apply it as broadly as we could, or as extensively as we could, or share that idea with others around us. Because it can be a really important part of wellness, is to have music almost provide a regulating, balancing role in our life.
Well, it makes a lot of sense to me. And we don't watch a ton of TV, but when we watch, one of the things I've been amazed at recently is it's like every advertisement is for some kind of drug. I mean, they got a pharmaceutical fix for anything that you got, and I don't know if music can replace all those things, but certainly some of them, music would be maybe a better proactive antidote than just reaching for the medicine cabinet all the time.
Interestingly, it's either early days on that, with music therapy being just out of its infancy, maybe in some ways, but also perhaps that's some of the oldest stuff that we may know. As you go around the world and you find there's all kinds of cultures where music is a big part of their society. It's a part of how the community comes together. It's part of their spiritual life, and having music and kind of making this music together is how they connect with their sense of something greater than themselves. And in those kinds of almost trance-like states that you can get into with that, all kinds of things may be possible. And maybe this has been going on for thousands of years, and we're only rediscovering some of this, and maybe having some scientific ways of measuring some of the why, but certainly not all of it. It's not too easy for us to measure the soul and the spirit yet,
right.
And how music seems to have a close relationship with that.
Well, I hope we're heading into an era where music takes more of a major role, because some people seem seriously out of tune. Finally, I guess I wanted to ask, as a Barbershop Harmony, not just singer and all that, but as a judge, it's a little bit of an open-ended question, I guess, but what have you seen that way? What have you experienced that way? I've heard some barbershop, I think I told you, and said it in the interview with Christina, when I sat in with the board of Harmony Inc. and they sang a song. It was like being in a Tibetan healing bowl. It was so full and rich and profound, and it felt like home. And you're able to listen to these types of things all the time. Kind of what is going on there? What are you listening for? And I guess people really do get pretty good at hitting those notes and reacting and making some beautiful sounds, huh?
It's interesting that in a barbershop contest, it's a place where the air can feel a little bit rarefied. Everyone's there to put their very best work onto the performance stage. But at the same time, if you're there to be evaluated, it can be very challenging to just be fully present and fully authentic. You might be thinking about not making a mistake or doing well, or just be anxious, And so sometimes, like some of the barbershop that you've heard, it might have been in a parlor or in a small room. Maybe there's some folks around, but it's a very natural state, and folks might be very relaxed, and some very beautiful moments can happen. And so part of it is that even though there's a lot of technique to making great barbershop sounds, and there's a lot of technique to to making a piece of music really come to life. The thing that's the most powerful is when the performers are so immersed in what they're doing that it's almost like time has stopped for them. They're in the story, they're in the song, they're creating it together, and there might even be in a rapport with the audience where it feels like the audience is in that moment with them. And so for me, the most powerful moments are when people are just so fully present in sharing a story, sharing an emotion. The people performing may have a certain thing in their heart that they're sharing, and sometimes it happens in a way that the people who are hearing it are able to bring themselves fully to the moment. So it's not being overly scripted or controlled. It's sharing, and it's open, and people can kind of bring themselves to that. And so when that's happening, it's loaded with quote flaws, but it's at such a level that the flaws are the art. It's like the technical stuff is very, very strong, and it could be even stronger, but maybe that would make it more antiseptic, or more like a beautiful painting on a wall that's being observed rather than something that's being lived. And so it's those performances that are where you feel the heartbeat in it. You feel like there's risks being taken, and there's a certain amount of abandon. Some of those can be just life-changing. And I've definitely had a chance to be up close and personal. And I've got to write down a score and give an evaluation for performance, and there's nothing on my sheet. There's nothing on the page from the time they walked on until they left, and that's a great feeling, and it's also one of those feelings. But you know what you're going to talk about because
you just lived it.
You lived it.
Yeah.
It's fantastic.
Well, I'm encouraging myself to do more listening and participating in barbershop stuff, and hope I get a chance to visit with you and Christina sometime soon, and
lovely, and
do that sort of thing. But I want to thank you very much. I mean, I kind of feel like we could just keep on talking, and maybe we should sometime. Sure. But this has been very informative and interesting, and I think there's a lot to be said for having spent 4 decades doing music as opposed to 4 decades doing law. So,
yes.
Congrats on that. Thanks so much for taking the time to be here. All my best to Christina and your whole family.
Thank you, Jeff. It's been a pleasure. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, sure thing. All right, everybody. Richard Lewellen, and check out Music Therapy and Barbershop Harmony. Thanks, everybody. You've been listening to Planetary Gig Talk, Tales of Music and Magic. I'm your host, Jefferson Glassy, Chief Spiritual Dude of the Planetary Gig Society. We talk with musicians and others about the power of music and how we can use music to help create a better world. Please check out our website, www.planetarygigs.org, for information about some of the organizations promoting music and musicians, resources about the power of music, books, movies, articles, including new research on music and the brain. We welcome your support. The Planetary Gig Society is a Section 501c3 charitable organization, and you can donate on the website. You also can receive a free email signature block demonstrating your support for Planetary Gig Society. Please follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Planetary Gigs. And we want to thank fabulous musician and teacher Eric Weinberg of Little Eric Studios for the Planetary Gig Talk music titled Chill Kid, It's Saul. So please check out Planetary Gig Talk on iTunes, Google Play, and Stitcher. Subscribe and hear all the upcoming episodes. Thanks very much.